Well, one bloke who talks sense and has for years is the One Nation Queensland Senator Malcolm Roberts. Now, this bloke is no dunce. He'd run rings round most people who sit on the parliamentary benches. Firstly, he's from the bush. He's lived in the Hunter Valley and Brisbane. He graduated from the University of Queensland with honours as an engineer, but he decided he needed practical experience working as a coal-face miner, mainly underground, for 3 years around Australia. He rose through the management ranks to lead and turn around underground coal mines, a coal processing plant, and he managed an ocean shiploader. He also has a master's degree in business administration from the University of Chicago Graduate School of Business, one of the world's most respected universities for finance and economics. He's investigated global warming and climate change, analysed the data, and exposed what he's called the corruption of the science. In fact, he has publicly argued that 10 senators and members in the last parliament have stated or shown in writing that they've never received logical scientific evidence proving that carbon dioxide from human activity causes climate change and therefore needs to be cut. And many Labor, Liberal and National Party members have privately confided to Malcolm Roberts that there is no scientific basis for their party's climate and energy policies, but they remain silent. The former CSIRO research scientist and federal MP Dennis Jensen, at the time the only scientist in the parliament, repeatedly argued his disgust with CSIRO's betrayal of climate science and the CSIRO evolving into an unscientific, politicised climate advocacy group. He was a Liberal MP from WA, Dennis Jensen, ignored by his party, and he lost pre-selection because of his views. Senator Malcolm Roberts has argued that the Senate should reject the climate change bills due to the complete lack of cost-benefit analysis. Malcolm Roberts joins me. Malcolm Roberts, thank you for your time, thank you for your scholarship, and thank you for hanging in there. So basically you're telling us that there are people in the National Parliament meant to represent us who agree that they've seen no proof that carbon dioxide from human activity causes climate change, but they remain silent.
The majority of them remain silent. And why? Because Dennis Jensen got the boot from Parliament because he spoke up. But there are 10. If time permits later, I wouldn't mind mentioning the 10 who have written to me and said that they have never seen the evidence. 10 with guts and courage.
Back in 2016, that's now 6 years ago, the father of the Senate then, Senator Ian McDonald, stated in the Senate that you had started the debate on climate science that the Parliament had never had. Malcolm Roberts, that debate has never eventuated, has it?
No, it has never eventuated. I've challenged Dean Natali when he was in the Senate and Larissa Waters and others in the Senate to provide me with the evidence and also to debate the science and the corruption of science. They have always run from me. They have never done it.
Well, talking about Larissa Waters, back in October 2010, you challenged Larissa Waters to debate the climate science and the corruption of climate science during a joint participation in a forum at Brisbane's Powerhouse Centre 12 years ago. She jumped to her feet and said she wouldn't debate you.
Correct. You couldn't get her up quick enough. She was on her feet in a flash saying, I won't debate you. She re-emphasised it again later that evening. She said to me to my face, I will not debate you.
And Mark Butler, who was Labor's climate change spokesperson, he wouldn't debate you either.
Well, I challenged Larissa Waters again in 2016 in May and also Mark Butler at a function in Brisbane, and they both would not debate me.
Absolutely.
And I've challenged Larissa Waters since in the Senate, no debate.
You wrote on the 24th of July last year to senators and members who had stated or implied that carbon dioxide from human activity needs to be cut. You asked them for logical, scientific points as the basis for their claim. All of them, am I right to say, failed to provide any such points or evidence. And before I get your answer there, these people included Zali Steggall, Larissa Waters, Simon Birmingham, the wet from South Australia, waste of a Senate seat, Jenny McAllister, Penny Wong, Trent Zimmerman, Mark Butler, Scott Morrison, Barnaby Joyce, Anthony Albanese, Adam Bant, David Littleproud, Josh Frydenberg, Angus Taylor, Karen Andrews, Greg Hunt, Tony Burke, Tanya Plibersek. And what happened?
Well, also Matt Canavan in there, but not one of them could provide me with the evidence. Only 4 out of the 19, Alan, responded. And they were hopeless, absolutely hopeless. And it's interesting to note that Jenny McAllister, one day in a conversation I had with her, she's from the Labor Party, she got to the Labor Party on a ticket to climate change. She was a policy advisor. She's spouted this rubbish, and that's been her reward to get into Parliament, and now she's pushing it.
Stegall came to your office in 2021 last year, did she not, to try to persuade you to vote for her proposed climate change legislation. She couldn't provide any logical, scientific points showing the need for the bill. And when you asked her to provide such fundamental basis for the legislation, she was speechless.
She just stared at me, didn't know what to say. Absolutely nothing. Hopeless, completely hopeless. And she's supposed to be a lawyer, knows evidence. Rubbish.
Rubbish. You repeatedly asked the then Morrison government's Senate leader, Matthias Cormann, for the logical scientific points to support climate and energy policies. He couldn't answer your question.
No, he said what we need to do is to fulfil our international agreements and obligations.
So basically that's the basis for the policy, which is costing Australians billions of dollars and will cost trillions of dollars in jobs. Now, you say no Australian federal, state or territory government has provided the scientific basis for a mandate to push, much less pass, legislation cutting the production of carbon dioxide from human activity.
Correct. No agency, no foreign government, no UN entity, no one. No academic, no one. Zip, zero, zilch.
You cross-examined the CSIRO and its chief scientist on climate science over many years and many hours. And during the CSIRO's presentation, did they not admit that they had never stated, the CSIRO, that they had never stated that carbon dioxide from human activity poses a danger?
Correct. And then when we said, well, how come politicians are telling us that they rely on advice from CSIRO, they said, you better ask the politicians.
Yeah, the danger came from politicians, not from us. But the CSIRO has never quantified any specific impact of carbon dioxide from human activity on any climate or any weather variable like temperature, rainfall, droughts, floods and storms. Nothing.
Correct. And Alan, fundamental in any policy is to be able to tell me how much of what we're doing affects something else. If you can't do that, you haven't got a policy. If you can't do that, you can't do the cost-benefit analysis. You can't cost the options. If you can't do that, you can't measure progress. We are going down a rabbit burrow that's got an alligator trap down the bottom of it. We are heading into disaster, trillions of dollars.
No doubt. Didn't CSIRO admit that today's temperatures are not unprecedented?
Yes, they did. They looked at me just a metre away from me on the table. And the head of the CSIRO at the time, Climate Division, said they're not claiming that today's temperatures are not unprecedented. Not unprecedented.
So CSIRO were relying...
Who caused them in the past?
Yeah, they were relying on unvalidated, erroneous and discredited computer models.
We asked them to provide the logical scientific points, which is empirical evidence, hard data, within a framework, a scientific framework, logical framework that proves cause and effect. They failed repeatedly. We had 3 sessions with them, each of 2.5, 3 hours in length. They failed all 3 occasions, and they couldn't provide us with the basic, and what they ended up doing was giving us models, which we know, as you've correctly said, are erroneous and unvalidated.
And they admitted not doing due diligence on data which was relied on from foreign external agencies. No due diligence. No due diligence on reports from external agencies. They just allowed politicians and journalists to misrepresent CSIRO without any correction. My God, they misled the Parliament.
Correct. Correct and correct. You've done your homework very well. You're spot on.
Hey, this is all common sense, eh? I mean, there are internationally respected scientists from 6 nations, including Australia, and covering many disciplines of climate science and climatology, and they confirmed, didn't they, that your conclusion that CSIRO has never presented logical scientific points needed as the basis of policy in science.
Correct. 100% correct.
So we've got a climate change bill. You've said the biggest change to Australian lives in Parliament that the Parliament has ever considered.
Correct, and I stand by that. Trillions of dollars we're looking at, Alan. And what's more, we're looking at a reverse Robin Hood. The poor are going to be paying a highly regressive impost burden to satisfy the rich. This is reverse Robin Hood. This is theft. It's fraud on a grand scale.
It is fraud. I'm going to tell you what to do. We've run out of time. I'm sure our viewers want to hear more from you. So let's leave it there for now. I'll get you back next week and we'll go through that climate change bill and see what, in fact, we are not being told. But look, you're doing wonderful work, Malcolm Roberts, and thank you so much for sharing your scholarship with us.
Thank you for having the guts and the integrity to do this, Alan.
Not
You're
at
one
all.
of very few.
It's not, yeah, absolutely, I know that. I don't know about guts and integrity, one of the very few. Well, you get cancelled, you see. You don't get cancelled here. We're not woke here. But for you viewers out there, there's a man, he's in the Senate. You may not have heard of him. From Queensland, Malcolm Roberts, knows the scene backwards. We'll talk to him again next week.